Hi, welcome back to my channel. So as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I had done a very brief overview video, just sort of surfacing or skimming over my thoughts and opinions on a book called Beds Are for Flowers by R.K.Gold. This was the selected book for the book club that I'm a part of, hashtag back of the book club. Hashtag back of the bookshelf, which is an Instagram book club that has been created and hosted by Nichi at I Read Past My Bedtime, and I will link her channel and the book club down below, as well as the author who has his own channel on here, so you can go and check out more about him and the story maybe behind the book. So this is more of an in-depth overview, if you will. So if you haven't read this book yet and you plan on it, I'd highly recommend you just watching the other video and ignoring this one. If you are in the middle of reading this, unless you have no interest in reading it or don't really care about spoilers, then by all means continue watching. Okay, so again, it's called Beds Are for Flowers, and I really enjoy the cover. I really love the colors in this. It reminds me a lot of the paint pours and things that I've gotten into lately on my art side of it. So this starts off as a setting in a small type town where the town is in a state of, not sure how you would explain it. They're not in a state of mourning, but they're in a very awkward time, I guess, if you will, where, in a lack of a word or better to explain it, they feel like the color has been drained from their world. You know, grass is a very dull gray, brownish type color, all the greens, all the blues, everything you would come to see in a regular day-to-day, your day-to-day life. Everything from the color of a rose to the color of, a pencil, everything has been void of color. And they blame this on the world and the changes that has come upon it. So basically, they attribute this to reapers sort of disturbing a balance that goes on. So I'll get more into that. So in the beginning of the story, you're following two little kids who are brother and sister, and then of course their friend, who I can't pronounce that one kid's name to save my life. So right now it's going to be Clarence, which is the little boy, Jesse, which is the sister, the brother and sister, and then the friend, because I can't even begin to try and pronounce his name. So the three of them, who are friends, and the brother and sister of Jesse and Clarence, their father has come down with some kind of a cough, and it's deteriorating his health very, very quickly. And the way that their town or their way of life is that a reaper, once someone has become ill or is near death, regardless of age or circumstance, will appear to them in their home and will escort that person to, they call it the end. It could be any way of describing it. It could be their version of heaven, the hereafter, the next phase of life, however you want to put that. It guides them to the next part of their journey. So it is their way of dealing with death, if you will. And so the kids are bound and determined, as is the wife, to figure out ways of bargaining with the reaper or with death to extend the father's time as much as they can. At this point, it's day by day by day, and they're sacrificing hours and time off their own life as well as any other means they can figure out in order to accomplish this goal. And they're battling this. And I like sort of how they went about this, because the way that they deal with the reapers, to me, they represent death and another way of looking at it. And based on the theory that once the Reaper takes this person into the next stage, they will come back and bring back something from the family member or friend who has passed on. In this case, it's an acorn that they plant, and it can grow, and it would represent sort of the spirit of the person that has passed on. And I really liked that part of it. I thought it was an interesting way of describing or dealing with death. You know, many don't know how to deal with it, and well, everyone deals with it in their own way due to religious or cultural beliefs. It is an interesting way to see another take on the concept that death is just another step in your journey, that the death isn't the end. And without quoting a movie where, you know, I'll go into another tangent because I'm really bad at that. So without trying to quote a movie, you know, death is just the beginning, or as you know, it's not the end. So, you know, when they go, they bring back something. The acorn to me almost signifies the person's spirit, that they never really leave you. You know, they go on to the next part of their journey, the next part of their phase, and they come back in another form or another way, and they're never really gone. They may not be there in flesh and blood, but they're never really gone from you. And I like that concept and the fact that they sort of embrace that theory within this story. So they go on from fighting the Reaper to battling, you know, little creatures and things that have seeped out from the world in between. So, following a little bit, the Reaper will assist this person into a journey, and it's on this journey stage between the hereafter or the end and from life. It's a little bit of a journey, and they encounter a lot of different creatures and obstacles and things that they have to overcome, and not everyone makes it past into that journey very well. Not everyone survives. And again, it explains a delicate balance between the different worlds. So in this one, it's sort of a description of like several different worlds. You've got, you know, the present day where people are living. You've got that in-between balance, the journey or the road that people have to take in order to get to the end once they have passed on. There's the end, which is your final resting place, if you will. And then there's small bits in between that, things called, you know, the darkness or the pit. And each one of these places all have their role to play. And if one of them is thrown out of whack, the whole thing gets disrupted and everyone suffers. So in order to live in harmony, so to speak, or to keep everything cycling properly, everything needs to be in a particular balance. And it describes how, it goes on later to describe how a particular Reaper who, as you end up learning, that each Reaper has a sibling, and that one Reaper decided that they didn't like the way the humans were treating the world and how they used up resources and contaminated the world, and they didn't like it, and they had absolutely nothing good to say about it. And they weren't just angry or not liking the situation, they were willing to take the matters into their own hands and try and change it or disrupt it. And its sibling stepped in and in the end ended up killing his own brother to stop him from doing this. But in doing that, he ended up upsetting a very big, it upset the balance. So the Reaper that died, I say that died because you find out later that he's not really gone. He takes the form of a tree, which represents the end, and he prohibits people from passing through it because he doesn't believe that they deserve it. So going through this journey, they have to get through this tree, and it's their belief, as they find out later, that it's because of this Reaper who has taken residence in this tree that has disrupted all of the balance. It's made deals with creatures in the pit. It's made deals with, you know, other creatures and things to make everything so that his tree and his little bubble flourishes, but in consequence everything else kind of lacks and doesn't thrive as well. So creatures and balances and worlds sort of overflow, and nothing is very well in order. So the book follows these two kids who originally set out to try and save their dad, but in the end, they end up realizing that there's much more at stake and a bigger thing to fix. So they discover that their neighbor happens to be the brother that tried to prevent this all from happening. Excuse me. And he assists the kids a little bit by giving them a couple pieces of information and pointing them in the right direction, hoping that maybe they could overcome his brother and stop it, because he can't. Or won't. So the kids embark on this journey, and they end up being guided by the Reaper that comes to claim their dad. They end up striking some kind of a bargain, and the Reaper agrees to take them into this next phase to face the Reaper in the tree that's holding everything up. So along the way, they go across or come across quite a few different obstacles. It's sort of like walking into a world of illusion where you don't want to believe anything around you apart from those you walked in there with, and you stay to the path. So it's always theory that when walking through a woods, you never divert from the path, because it's never safe to, especially in the dark. At least that's the theory. So going off in that same kind of idea, they put that concept into this. And as they're journeying down this path, there's a lot of different temptations that get thrown at them when they're challenged over and over and over again. Once they finally get past those challenges, they do come across the Reaper in the tree, and they discover that the Reaper in the tree is selfish and doesn't really care anymore what happens to anybody else, as long as he is good and his little world is flourishing, and basically as long as he's, king of the hill, we're good to go. So the kids do end up defeating that, but at a cost. You will discover later on, as they go on, that the brother Clarence, he makes a bit of a deal with the creature from the realm, if you will, the pit. And it allows him to accomplish his goal by overcoming the Reaper in the tree. But again, it came at a bit of a cost. And you learn what that cost is. And sometimes you have to decide whether or not that cost is the price you really want to pay to restore balance. And sometimes you do, and sometimes it's needed, and sometimes you have to make that choice. But I found it interesting as to what the cost was. And I don't know, it intrigued me, I guess. So once they get past that point and, everything is hunky-dory, I guess, they do accomplish, they do defeat the Reaper in the tree once they get to that point. On the journey back, they step back into their realm, and they come across, basically they step back into a world that they thought they left and didn't. The world they return to isn't the same exactly as they left it. All the color and life that sort of seemed to be void was suddenly flowing back into their world. So as they're stepping in, it takes some time for it all to come back. But as they're coming in, suddenly the grass is greener, and without being metaphorical, the grass is greener and the sky is brighter blue, and all the flowers seem to come to life. Even small things like homes and people's expressions, everything seems to come back and flourish. And now balance seems to have been restored. So the last challenge these kids have to face is the fact that, whether they like it or not, their dad is not getting any younger, he's not getting any better, and he does have to move on. So the Reaper ends up taking their dad and leading them into the next phase of his journey. And you'll end up learning a little bit of a change in the Reapers, and I won't divulge that just in case you do want to read it and you haven't gotten that far. But the biggest twist there for me was the Reaper and how that came to be. But they do guide him back, and when he comes back from dropping their dad off as he makes it to the end, they bring back an acorn. The acorn gets planted in their yard. And I really like that concept that death isn't the end, it's just another phase of life, it's just another phase of the journey. And they never really leave you. It might take some time for them to make their way back to you, but it will happen. So yeah, this book really kept me on the edge of my seat. You couldn't really guess anything. This was definitely a book where you couldn't even skim pages. I won't deny that, reading some books, they'll get into some really dreary, strewn out description part about something, and you can kind of skim over it because you're not missing anything of real importance. You can kind of keep going, and it helps speeds up reading through some of the really thick books. But this one, despite the fact that it was really small, actually held a fair amount of detail and information that you couldn't skip over. Actually, there were definitely some points where I ended up rereading some sections just to make sure I fully grasped everything that was written and that I didn't miss anything, because it could have led or could have described or could have been part of something bigger that I really didn't want to miss out on or not understand properly. So definitely one that you couldn't skim or miss out. You couldn't skip a page, couldn't skip a word. It reminded me a little bit of, for those of you who don't know, there's a movie called Bridge to Terabithia, and it's a bit of an older movie, but it reminded me of that. The world that gets created and all the fantasy and the creatures and the imagination behind it was, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely amazing. So this is the first in apparently a 4-book series, as he recently just said he was doing it in 4 books. He is currently working on the 3rd one, and the 2nd one is due to release soon. It's not quite out yet, but I am anxiously looking forward to reading or picking up the 2nd one, as like I said, this one was, although it could be done as a standalone, it is not, and it really did keep me on the edge of my seat. I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen. It isn't an overly quick-paced book, but it's not overly slow either. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this to anybody who wants something different, as I wouldn't know how to describe that. It's definitely something different, but very enjoyable, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you again so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed before and you're new to my channel, welcome to my channel, and thank you so much for checking me out. Do be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon for when new videos come up, and just to hit the like if you liked it. If you've got any questions or comments, or you have something to add, if you've read this book before, feel free to leave it down below. I look forward to discussing that with you. If you are an existing watcher, thank you so much for coming back to watch. I greatly appreciate your support, and I will see you in the next video.